I always believed that raising my son with unconditional love would nurture a bond that could weather any storm. I never imagined that the same hands I once held as he took his first steps would be calculating the value of my life in dollars and cents. Trust is a delicate thing, like fine china passed down through generations, beautiful until it shatters beyond repair. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Margaret Wilson, Maggie to friends and family, and until 6 months ago, my life was comfortably predictable. At 63, I'd settled nicely into retirement after 3 decades of teaching high school English. My modest craftsman, home in Lakeside, Michigan had become my sanctuary, especially after losing Harold to a heart attack 5 years ago. With its weathered blue siding and wraparound porch overlooking the water, it was everything I needed. Peaceful, full of memories, and mine. Every morning followed the same gentle routine. Coffee with Charlie, my golden retriever, on the porch, tending to my garden beds that burst with color even as autumn approached, and afternoons spent in my sunroom studio where I painted watercolors that had, surprisingly to me, gained a modest following online. I'd built a life that felt complete, or at least as complete as it could be without Harold. My son Thomas, Tom as he prefers, lived an hour away in Grand Rapids with his wife, Rebecca. They visited for holidays and occasional weekends, though those visits had grown increasingly sparse over the years. I understood. They were building their own lives. Tom had followed his father into finance, working as an advisor at Midwest. Financial partners, while Rebecca climbed the corporate ladder at a pharmaceutical company. They were always impeccably dressed, driving newer cars than necessary, and quick to mention their latest vacation plans. I never questioned their lifestyle, even when Tom occasionally called with temporary cash flow problems. Over the years, these problems had added up substantially, helping with their down payment, covering Tom's graduate school loans when he fell behind, bailing him out when a day trading venture went south. Each time I dipped into my retirement savings, comforting myself with the thought that he was my only child. What else was I saving for, if not for him? "It's just until my next commission check, Mom," he'd say. "I'll pay you back double." The repayments never materialized, but I never pressed the issue. I chalked it up to what mothers do: sacrifice without expectation of return. That particular Wednesday began like any other. I was arranging flowers from my garden when my phone lit up with Tom's name. "Mom, great news!" His voice carried that distinctive pitch it always had when he wanted something. "Rebecca's been promoted. We're celebrating this weekend. Any chance you could help us with a little advance on the festivities? Just until payday next week." I hesitated, an unusual response for me. "How much do you need, Tom?" "Just $5,000. I'll transfer it right back to you next Friday." The request was larger than usual, but I agreed. I always did. "Thanks, Mom. You're the best. Love you." What happened next wasn't planned. As I hung up, I noticed my banking app was still open, from paying bills earlier. A habit of prudence made me check my balance, and that's when I saw it. A transfer of $175,000 to Tom 3 months ago. My heart skipped. I had no memory of such a transfer. With trembling fingers, I called the bank. After verifying my identity, the representative confirmed the transaction. "Yes, Mrs. Wilson, that transfer was authorized on March 12th. You signed the paperwork in person at our Grand Rapids branch." "That's impossible," I whispered. "I haven't been to Grand Rapids since Christmas." "Let me pull up the documentation," she said. After a few minutes of clicking, her voice returned, hesitant. "Mrs. Wilson, the signature does match what we have on file, but if you're saying you didn't authorize this..." I felt ill. "Please freeze my accounts immediately. I need to investigate this." After hanging up, I sat motionless at my kitchen table, Charlie resting his head on my lap as if sensing my distress. The sunny kitchen suddenly felt cold. I'd taught literature for 30 years. I understood foreshadowing when I saw it. This was just the first page of a much darker story. I didn't confront Tom immediately. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I began to investigate my son. Eleanor, Ellie, my closest friend since college and former legal secretary, came over that evening. As we sat on my porch, the lake shimmering in the distance, I shared my discovery. "Maggie, this is serious," she said, her normally cheerful face grave. "That's forgery and fraud. Have you considered going to the police?" I shook my head. "Not yet. I need to understand what's happening first." Ellie nodded, understanding my reluctance. "Then we need more information. What do you know about their finances?" "Almost nothing," I admitted. Tom always keeps those conversations vague, just enough details to justify needing help, but nothing concrete. "Let's start with public records," Ellie suggested. "Property, court filings, tax liens, anything that might show financial trouble." What we discovered over the next few days shook me to my core. Tom and Rebecca had purchased a vacation property in northern Michigan 6 months ago, a luxury cabin valued at nearly $800,000. There were multiple credit cards maxed to their limits. Most alarming was a series of gambling debt collections that had been settled just after the mysterious transfer from my account. "He stole from you, Maggie," Ellie said gently. "The question is, how much deeper does this go?" The answer came 2 days later in the form of a routine piece of mail, an insurance premium notice. I almost discarded it until I noticed it was for a policy I didn't recognize. Upon opening it, my blood turned to ice. It was a confirmation of payment for a $2 million life insurance policy on me, with Thomas Wilson listed as the sole beneficiary. The policy had been taken out just 4 months ago. I stared at the paper, my teacher's mind connecting dots with horrifying clarity. The stolen money, the new insurance policy, the sudden invitation Tom had extended last week for a relaxing weekend at Eagle Ridge, known for its treacherous hiking trails and deadly accidents. My son wasn't just stealing from me. He was planning to kill me. That night, sleep eluded me. I paced my bedroom, Charlie watching with concerned eyes. The magnitude of betrayal was almost incomprehensible. This wasn't just about money. This was about my life, casually evaluated and scheduled for termination by my own child. I picked up my phone a dozen times to call the police, but something held me back. Perhaps it was denial, or maybe just the lingering remnants of maternal protection. Instead, I called Tom. "Mom, did you think about this weekend? Rebecca's really looking forward to it." His voice sounded so normal, so familiar. Had I imagined everything? "Actually, I was calling about something else." I kept my voice steady. "I received a strange insurance notice today. Do you know anything about it?" The pause was brief but telling. "Oh, that. Yeah, I meant to tell you. It's just a protection policy I set up through work. Employee benefit thing. I can add family members. Thought it would give you some peace of mind." The lie flowed so smoothly I almost doubted myself. Almost. "That's thoughtful," I replied. "And the premium? It seems quite high." Another pause. "Yeah, comprehensive coverage, you know? Don't worry about that. It's covered through my benefits package." "I see. And this hiking trip? Where exactly in Eagle Ridge were you thinking?" "The North Trail. Great views this time of year. Just thought it would be nice for us to spend some time together." The North Trail. Known locally as Dead Man's Drop for its steep cliffs and narrow paths. 3 hikers had fallen to their deaths there in the past decade. "Sounds lovely," I said. "I'll need to check my calendar and get back to you." After hanging up, I made a decision. If Tom wanted to play games, I would show him I remembered how to play too. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. The next morning, I visited my doctor, Dr. Sofia Martinez, for a complete physical. "Any particular concerns today, Maggie?" she asked as she checked my blood pressure. "Just being cautious," I replied. "My son has expressed some concerns about my health recently. I want to make sure everything's in order." Dr. Martinez raised an eyebrow but continued her examination. An hour later, she returned with my results. "Maggie, you're in excellent health for any age, let alone 63. Blood pressure optimal, heart strong, reflexes sharp. You're more fit than most of my patients in their 40s. I smiled, genuinely relieved. "That's good to hear." "Though I am curious," she added, "what specific concerns did Tom mention?" I hesitated before answering truthfully. "He seems to think I'm becoming forgetful, possibly showing early signs of dementia." Dr. Martinez frowned. "I see no evidence of cognitive decline whatsoever. Your mental acuity tests are perfect. Has he mentioned this to you directly?" "Not in so many words," I admitted. "Just little comments here and there." Her expression softened. "Maggie, as your doctor for 15 years, I can confidently say there's nothing wrong with your memory or cognitive function. If Tom is suggesting otherwise—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "It might be worth exploring why he feels that way." I knew exactly why. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A forgetful mother with declining health made a convenient narrative for an accidental fall on a dangerous hiking trail. As I left her office with a clean bill of health, I felt something hardening inside me. The hurt remained, a deep wound that might never heal, but alongside it grew something stronger. Resolve. That afternoon, I visited my bank in person, speaking with the manager about the fraudulent transfer. I filed an official fraud report, providing evidence of the forged signature. I contacted the insurance company about the policy taken out in my name, initiating an investigation into how it had been approved without my legitimate consent. But most importantly, I called my lawyer. "Mrs. Wilson, given these circumstances, I strongly recommend we make immediate changes to your estate planning," Mr. Graves advised after I explained the situation in careful detail. "What do you suggest?" I asked. "First, a new will that explicitly disinherits Thomas, with documented reasoning to prevent any contest. Second, transferring your major assets into an irrevocable trust with carefully selected trustees. Third, powers of attorney for healthcare and finances assigned to someone other than family, perhaps Ms. Chen, given your long friendship." Nodded, feeling both sorrow and certainty. "And what about the Eagle Ridge invitation?" Mr. Graves's expression darkened. "Mrs. Wilson, given what you've shared, I would strongly advise against being alone with your son anywhere, especially in a remote location. Have you considered filing a restraining order?" "Not yet," I said. "I need to handle this carefully." That evening, as darkness settled over the lake, I sat on my porch swing with Charlie beside me. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound, but the mother in me still searched for explanations, for the little boy who once brought me dandelions and homemade Mother's Day cards. Where had I gone wrong? Was it after Harold died, when I'd retreated into grief and perhaps hadn't noticed Tom's struggles? Was it earlier, when his father's expectations created pressure I couldn't see? Or was it simply greed, a character flaw I'd refused to acknowledge as it grew? It didn't matter now. The son I thought I knew existed only in memory. The man who plotted my death for financial gain was a stranger wearing a familiar face. My phone lit up with a text from Tom. "Mom, confirmed for Eagle Ridge this weekend. We'll pick you up Friday at 9. Dress warm." I drew a deep breath and replied, "Looking forward to it." Then I began to plan. First, I called Ellie. "I need a favor, a big one." "Name it," she said without hesitation. I need you to come with me to Eagle Ridge this Friday. Not hiking, just nearby. And I need you to bring your nephew, the one who's a police officer. Maggie, what are you thinking? I'm thinking it's time to see exactly what my son has planned for me. The next call was to Richard Parker, Rich, who ran the community garden where I volunteered. A retired architect with kind eyes and a steady presence, he'd lost his wife to cancer 2 years ago. We'd developed a friendship over shared losses and shared soil. Rich, remember when you offered to help me with any home repairs I might need? I might need to cash in that offer, but it's complicated. Complicated doesn't scare me, Maggie. What do you need? Security cameras, discreet ones, and I need them installed tomorrow. To his credit, he didn't ask why. He simply said, I'll be there at 9. By Thursday evening, my home had 4 hidden cameras capturing every angle of the main living areas. My lawyer had expedited the new will and trust documents, which I signed that afternoon. I'd withdrawn a modest amount of cash and hidden it in a secure location, along with copies of all my important documents and evidence of Tom's fraud. Most crucially, I'd recorded a video statement detailing my suspicions, the evidence I'd gathered, and my mental and physical health status, with Dr. Martinez providing a brief statement confirming my sound mind and body. The video was stored with my lawyer, with instructions to release it to authorities if anything happened to me. I packed a small bag for Eagle Ridge, not hiking gear, but comfortable clothes suitable for my actual plan. As I folded a sweater, Charlie nudged my hand with his nose, whining softly. Don't worry, old friend, I assured him, scratching behind his ears. I'm not going anywhere. At least, not where they're planning to send me. I slept surprisingly. Well, that night, perhaps because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't reacting. I was acting. The power had shifted, though Tom didn't know it yet. Tomorrow would test not just my resolve, but my ability to face the hardest truth of all. That, sometimes, the greatest act of self-love is letting go of those who wish you harm, even when they're your own flesh and blood. As dawn broke over the lake, casting golden light across my bedroom, I rose and dressed with deliberate care. I chose clothing that projected exactly the image Tom expected. A trusting, perhaps slightly naive mother, eager for quality time with her son. Nothing in my appearance would betray the steel that had formed within me. I fed Charlie extra treats and hugged him goodbye. Ellie would be by to take care of him while I was gone. Then I sat at my kitchen table, sipping tea and watching. The minutes ticked by until my doorbell rang at precisely 9 a.m. It was time to see just how far my son was willing to go. When I opened the door, Tom and Rebecca stood on my porch with manufactured smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Tom wore hiking boots and cargo pants, while Rebecca sported designer outdoor wear that looked like it had never seen a trail. Mom! Tom's enthusiasm felt rehearsed. He stepped forward to embrace me, and I allowed it, noting how his arms barely tightened around me. Ready for our adventure? Of course, I smiled, gesturing to my small backpack by the door. Just let me lock up. As I turned the key, I caught Rebecca's reflection in the glass door. She was scanning my living room with calculating eyes, likely mentally cataloging items of value. The antique grandfather clock from Harold's family, my mother's silver tea set, the watercolor paintings that had started selling for surprising sums through my online gallery. Your garden looks amazing, Helen, Rebecca said as we walked to their luxury SUV. She had called me Helen since the day they married, despite my gentle reminders that I preferred Maggie. A small rebellion, perhaps, or simply a way to keep me at arm's length. Thank you, I replied. The hydrangeas are particularly vibrant this year. Tom loaded my bag into the trunk with a theatrical grunt. What do you have in here, Mom? Rocks? I laughed lightly. Just the essentials. Better to be prepared, right? He exchanged a quick glance with Rebecca that confirmed everything I needed to know. They were counting on me being unprepared. The drive to Eagle Ridge took nearly 2 hours. I sat in the back seat, listening as Tom and Rebecca talked about their plans to renovate their kitchen, their upcoming winter trip to Aspen, a potential investment property they were considering. Not once did they mention the source of funding for these endeavors, though I had my suspicions. "How's work going, Tom?" I asked during a lull in their conversation. "Any interesting clients lately?" His shoulders tensed slightly. "Fine, busy, the usual." "And that promotion you mentioned last month? Did that come through?" Another barely perceptible freeze. "Still in the works. You know how corporations are, all that red tape." I nodded sympathetically while mentally noting the lie. According to Ellie's research, Tom had been placed on probation at Midwest Financial 3 months ago, following client complaints about aggressive investment strategies that had led to significant losses. As we turned onto the gravel road leading to Eagle Ridge Trail, my phone buzzed with a text from Ellie. "In position. Officer Ramirez is with me. Stay safe." I slipped the phone back into my pocket, comforted by their proximity. Whatever happened. Next, I wasn't truly alone. The parking area was nearly empty, just 2 other cars on a Friday morning. Perfect for their purposes, I imagined. Fewer potential witnesses. Tom retrieved a larger backpack from the trunk and began distributing supplies. "Water bottles for everyone," he announced, handing me a metal container. "Stay hydrated, Mom. It's important at your age." I accepted it with a smile, careful not to open it yet. "Thank you for thinking of me." Rebecca pulled out a small bag of trail mix. "I made this specially for you, Helen. All your favorites." I doubted she knew my favorites, but I took the bag and tucked it into my jacket pocket. "How thoughtful." "Oh, and you'll need these," Tom added, holding out a pair of hiking poles. "The trail gets pretty steep in places. Wouldn't want you to slip." The concern in his voice sounded genuine enough to fool a stranger. But I had heard genuine concern in Tom's voice before, when he was 7 and afraid of thunderstorms, when he was 16 and crashed Harold's car, when he was 22 and facing his first job rejection. This was different. This was performance. "Thank you," I said, testing the poles against the ground. "Lead the way." We set off on the trailhead, Tom in front, me in the middle, Rebecca behind. The optimal formation, I realized, if one wanted to stage an accident. Tom could ensure we took the most dangerous route, while Rebecca could be positioned to provide a helpful push if necessary. The first mile was gentle enough, a winding path through autumn-tinged woods, the ground carpeted with fallen leaves in russet and gold. Under different circumstances, I might have found it beautiful. Now, each step felt like moving deeper into a trap of my son's making. "Enjoying the fresh air, Mom?" Tom called over his shoulder. "Much better than being cooped up in that house all day, right?" "It is lovely," I agreed, maintaining the facade. "Though I'm hardly cooped up at home. Between the garden, my painting, and the senior center classes I teach, I'm quite busy." "Senior center?" Rebecca's voice carried a note of condescension. "How fulfilling." I let the comment pass, saving my energy for the real battle ahead. At the 1-mile marker, Tom paused, consulting a map he'd pulled from his pocket. "We have a choice here. We can take the main trail, which is longer, but gentler, or we can take the North Trail. It's more challenging but has incredible views." The infamous North Trail, just as he'd mentioned on the phone. "Which would you recommend?" I asked innocently. "The North Trail, definitely." He replied too quickly. "Worth the extra effort, trust me." Trust him. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Then, north it is," I agreed. As we turned onto the narrower path, the incline increased sharply. The trail hugged the edge of the ridge, with a steep drop-off to our right. No guardrails, no safety measures, just a crumbling edge between solid ground and a 50-foot fall onto jagged rocks below. "Careful here, Mom," Tom cautioned, his voice laced with an anticipation he couldn't quite disguise. "Use those poles. Take your time." I moved deliberately, demonstrating neither weakness nor exceptional strength, just an ordinary 63-year-old woman trusting her son's guidance. An hour into the hike, we reached a small clearing overlooking the valley. Autumn colors stretched below us like a patchwork quilt, the beauty a stark contrast to the ugliness of the moment. "Let's take a break," Tom suggested, setting down his backpack. "Drink some water, Mom. You look flushed." I unscrewed the cap of the water bottle he'd given me earlier, but only pretended to drink. When he turned to point out some landmark to Rebecca, I emptied most of the contents into a nearby bush. "Beautiful view," I commented, sitting on a flat rock near, but not too near the edge. "It gets even better around the next bend," Tom said, a shadow of eagerness crossing his face. "There's an overlook that's absolutely breathtaking." I had no doubt it would be breathtaking, particularly if one was plummeting from it. "I'd love to see it," I said. "But first I think I need a snack. That trail mix looks good right about now." I pulled out the bag Rebecca had given me, making a show of opening it while they watched. Then, with deliberate clumsiness, I spilled half the contents onto the ground. "Oh, goodness!" I exclaimed. "How careless of me." "Don't worry about it," Rebecca said quickly. "You should eat what's left, though. Keep your energy up." I picked a few nuts from what remained in the bag, careful to only touch pieces I could clearly see. "Delicious," I murmured, though I never actually placed any in my mouth. We rested for about 20 minutes, during which Tom grew increasingly fidgety, checking his watch repeatedly. "We should get moving if we want to reach the overlook and get back before dark," he urged, standing and shouldering his pack. "Of course," I agreed, rising to my feet. As I did, I stumbled slightly, grabbing Tom's arm for support. "Whoa, you okay?" he asked, steadying me with a convincing display of concern. "Just a little lightheaded for a moment," I said. "Probably. The altitude. I'll be fine." His eyes lit up at this sign of weakness. "We'll take it slow. I'm right here if you need support." The path grew narrower and more treacherous as we continued. Small rocks skittered away under our feet, plunging over the edge and rattling down the cliff face. The drop-off to our right seemed to grow steeper with each step. "Not much farther to the overlook," Tom encouraged as we rounded a bend. And then I saw it, the perfect spot for an accident. The trail widened into a small platform jutting out over the valley, with no barriers at the edge. The rock surface appeared smooth, almost slippery, with loose gravel scattered across it. "This is it," Tom announced with poorly concealed excitement. "The best view on the whole trail." He stepped out onto the platform, beckoning me to follow. Rebecca hung back slightly, positioning herself where she could observe without being too close to whatever was about to happen. I moved forward cautiously, using the hiking poles for support. "It's magnificent," I said, genuinely impressed by the vista despite the circumstances. The valley stretched below us, a tapestry of autumn colors under a crystal-clear blue sky. "Come closer to the edge," Tom encouraged. "You can see the waterfall from there." I took another step forward, keeping the poles firmly planted. "I can see fine from here." "No, Mom. You're missing the best part," he insisted, moving to my side and placing his hand on my back. "Just a couple more steps." His hand pressed against me, not forcefully yet, but with clear intent. Rebecca shifted behind us, suddenly alert, her eyes fixed on my position relative to the precipice. This was it, the moment they had planned for. A slight push, a startled cry, and gravity would do the rest. A tragic hiking accident, a grieving son, and a $2 million insurance payout. But I had a plan of my own. I took a deep breath, stiffened my posture, and turned to face Tom directly. Before we go any further, I said calmly, I'd like to discuss the life insurance policy you took out on me without my knowledge. The color drained from his face. His hand fell away from my back as if burned. What? What are you talking about? He stammered. The $2 million policy with Sentinel Life, I continued, my voice steady. The one you've been paying premiums on for the past 4 months. The one that identifies you as the sole beneficiary. Rebecca stepped forward, her designer hiking boots crunching on gravel. Helen, you must be confused. Tom's only looking out for your future. Am I also confused about the $175,000 stolen from my accounts? Or perhaps about the forged documents at Grand Rapids National Bank? I turned back to Tom. Or maybe I'm confused about why my son would bring me to the most dangerous section of Eagle Ridge Trail after dosing my water and trail mix with what I suspect is a sedative. Tom's face contorted, shifting rapidly between shock, anger, and calculation. Mom, you're not making any sense. I think we should get you back down the mountain. You're clearly not feeling well. Actually, I'm feeling perfectly clear-headed, I replied. Dr. Martinez gave me a complete physical and cognitive assessment just 2 days ago. She found me to be in excellent health, with no signs of the dementia you've been hinting at to your friends. Rebecca's eyes darted between us, her carefully cultivated image slipping. Tom, she's clearly paranoid. This is exactly what you warned me about. The only thing Tom has to be warned about, I said firmly, is that I've already contacted the insurance company, the bank, and my lawyer. The fraud investigations are already underway. Tom's expression hardened, the mask of concern dropping completely. You have no proof of anything. Don't I? I pulled out my phone, showing them the screen where the recording app was running. I have this entire conversation. I have the insurance documents. I have the bank records showing the forged transfer. And I have something else you should know about. I gestured toward the parking lot below, barely visible from our vantage point. My friend Ellie is down there right now with her nephew, Officer Ramirez. They've been tracking our progress up the mountain. If anything happens to me today, they have instructions to immediately turn over a comprehensive file to the authorities. The look that passed between Tom and Rebecca was one of pure panic. Their carefully constructed plan was unraveling before their eyes. This is ridiculous, Tom sputtered, backing away from me. You've lost your mind. My mind is perfectly intact, I assured him. Which is why I know exactly what you planned for today. A tragic accident, a grieving son, a substantial insurance payout. Rebecca recovered first, her sales training kicking in as she attempted damage control. Helen, these accusations are absurd. We brought you hiking because we care about you. Tom worries about you being isolated in that big house all alone. The house you've been pressuring me to put in your names? I asked. The one you've already measured for renovations, according to your text messages? Their stunned expressions confirmed I'd hit another mark. Electronic records were remarkably easy to obtain with the right legal authority, something Ellie had helped me understand. Let's all calm down, Tom said, voice tight with suppressed rage. Mom, you're clearly having some kind of episode. We should get you home and maybe schedule a doctor's appointment. I think that's an excellent idea, I agreed. Let's go back down, all of us together, at a safe distance from any edges, and then we can continue this conversation with the appropriate authorities present. We descended in tense silence, Tom leading, me in the middle, Rebecca behind. But now I kept careful track of their positions, never allowing either to get too close. The hiking poles I'd initially viewed as potential instruments of my demise became weapons of defense, firmly planted with each step. When we reached the parking area, Ellie's red sedan was parked beside Tom's SUV. She stood leaning against it, alongside a uniformed police officer. Relief flooded through me at the sight. Everything okay, Maggie? Ellie called as we approached. Just fine, I replied. though I think I've had enough hiking for one day. Officer Ramirez straightened, his hand casually resting near his holster. Mrs. Wilson, good to see you made it down safely. Tom's face had turned an alarming shade of red. What is this? Are we being detained? Not at all, Officer Ramirez replied smoothly. Just making sure everyone gets home safe. Rebecca grabbed Tom's arm, her fingernails digging into his sleeve. We should go, she hissed. Excellent idea, I agreed. I'll be riding back with Ellie. Tom's jaw tightened. Mom, don't be ridiculous. We drove you here. We'll drive you back. I think I prefer Ellie's company right now, I said. But don't worry. We'll have plenty of opportunities to talk in the coming days. The bank investigator is particularly eager to meet with you. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked to Ellie's car. She opened the passenger door for me, and I slid in, exhaling deeply as the door closed behind me. Through the windshield, I watched Tom and Rebecca engaged in heated whispers. Finally, they got into their SUV and peeled out of the parking lot, gravel spraying beneath their tires. Are you really okay? Ellie asked as she started the engine. I am, I said, surprised to find it was true. The confrontation had been painful but necessary, like lancing a wound to release the poison. You know this isn't over, she warned. People like that don't just give up. I know, I replied, but they know I'm not the easy target they thought. I was. That changes everything. On the drive home, I filled Ellie in on the details of the confrontation. Officer Ramirez followed in his patrol car, a precaution against Tom potentially doubling back. You should stay with me tonight, Ellie suggested as we neared Lakeside. Just to be safe. I shook my head. No, I need to be in my own home. Besides, Rich installed those security cameras yesterday. I'll be able to see if anyone approaches. She frowned but didn't press the issue. At least let Officer Ramirez do a security check before he leaves. I agreed to that compromise. When we arrived at my house, Officer Ramirez did a thorough sweep of the property while Ellie and I waited in the kitchen. Charlie greeted me with frantic joy, pressing against my legs as if he'd feared I wouldn't return. All clear, Officer Ramirez reported. I've left my card on your fridge, Mrs. Wilson. Call immediately if you have any concerns, day or night. I thanked him sincerely, then saw them both to the door. As Ellie hugged me goodbye, she whispered, Lock everything, and call me in the morning, early. I will, I promised. When they were gone, I secured every door and window, then checked that the security cameras were functioning properly. The system Rich had installed sent feeds directly to my phone, allowing me to monitor the property from anywhere in the house. Exhausted but oddly energized, I drew a hot bath, adding lavender oil to help calm my nerves. As I soaked in the fragrant water, I replayed the day's events. The look on Tom's face when I revealed I knew about the insurance policy. The way Rebecca's polished facade had cracked under pressure. The moment I reclaimed power in a relationship that had been unbalanced for far too long. After my bath, I made a cup of chamomile tea and settled into my favorite chair in the living room. Charlie curled at my feet. The house felt different somehow, still mine, but as if it had been cleansed of an invisible toxin. For years, Tom's manipulations had permeated these walls, tainting even my fondest memories with doubt and obligation. Now, that fog was lifting. My phone buzzed with a text from Rich. Hope the cameras are working well? Everything okay? I smiled at his concern. All working perfectly. Thank you again. No need for thanks. That's what friends do. Want me to come by tomorrow? I could check the system again, maybe fix that loose porch railing while I'm there. His offer warmed me. That would be nice. Afternoon, I'll make lunch. Looking forward to it, he replied. I was about to set my phone down when it rang, Tom's name flashing on the screen. My hand trembled slightly as I answered, putting the call on speaker. Hello, Tom. Mom. His voice sounded strained, tightly controlled. We need to talk about what happened today. Yes, we do, I agreed, preferably with my lawyer present. He ignored this. You've got this all wrong. I was trying to protect you. By taking out a life insurance policy without my knowledge? By bringing me to the edge of a cliff after giving me drugged food and water? I kept my tone even, conversational. That's not... He began, then stopped abruptly. When he continued, his voice had shifted to something softer, more vulnerable. Mom, I've been worried about you. You've been so alone since Dad died. I thought having financial security would help. It was the same manipulative tactic he'd used since childhood, turning on the charm when cornered, making me question my own perceptions. Tom, I said gently, we both know that's not true. The policy was never for my benefit, nor was the money you took from my accounts. I borrowed that money, he protested. I was going to pay it back. With the insurance payout after my death? Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken truths. I want to make this right, he said finally. Tell me how to fix this. For a moment, hope flickered in my chest. The eternal mother's hope that her child can change, can grow, can become the person she always believed they could be. But experience had taught me hard lessons about Tom's promises. Return the money you took, I said. Cancel the insurance policy. Seek professional help for your gambling addiction. Those would be good first steps. He scoffed. I don't have a gambling problem. The collection notices from 3 different casinos suggest otherwise. Another long pause. You've been investigating me. I've been protecting myself, I corrected. Something I should have done years ago. And if I don't do these things? His voice had hardened again. What then? You'll disown your only son? Turn your back on family? The guilt trip, his most reliable weapon, but it had lost its power. Tom, you turned your back on the meaning of family the moment you decided my life was worth more to you ended than continuing. If you choose not to make amends, I'll have no choice but to proceed with legal action. You wouldn't dare, he hissed. You'd never send your own son to jail. I sincerely hope it doesn't come to that, I said truthfully. The choice is yours. This isn't over, he threatened before hanging up. I sat in the quiet of my living room, Charlie's soft breathing the only sound. The confrontation I'd feared for so long had come and gone, leaving me shaken but still standing. Tom's threat lingered in the air, but it had lost much of its power. He knew I was no longer an easy mark, no longer willing to look the other way in the name of maternal love. As I prepared for bed, I realized I felt something unexpected. Not just fear or grief, but relief. The pretense was over. The careful dance of avoiding hard truths had ended. Whatever came next would at least be honest. I checked the security, camera feeds one last time before lying down. The house was secure, the property quiet. Charlie settled at the foot of my bed, his familiar weight comforting. We're going to be okay, I told him, though the words were really for myself. Sleep came surprisingly easily, deep and dreamless. When I woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through my bedroom windows, painting golden patterns on the wall. For the first time in weeks, I felt truly rested. I reached for my phone to call Ellie as promised, but before I could dial, a notification caught my eye, an alert from the security system. Someone had approached my front door at 3:17 a.m., lingered for several minutes, then left. With trembling fingers, I opened the app and played back the footage. The night vision camera showed a figure standing on my porch. Tom, his features clearly visible as he tested the doorknob, finding it locked. He stood there for a long moment, shoulders hunched, before finally turning away. I exhaled slowly. The locks had held. The cameras had worked. I was safe. But Tom's nocturnal visit confirmed what I already knew. This confrontation was far from over. The battle had merely shifted to a new terrain, and I needed to be ready for whatever came next. I called Ellie immediately after viewing the security footage, my voice steadier than I expected. He came to the house last night, I told her. Around 3 a.m. Tried the door but couldn't get in. That's it, Ellie said firmly. I'm coming over right now, and we're filing for a restraining order today. No arguments. While waiting for her arrival, I brewed a pot of coffee and sat at my kitchen table, reviewing my options. The confrontation at Eagle Ridge had forced things into the open, but it had also escalated the situation in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. Tom was cornered now, dangerous and desperate. By the time Ellie arrived, I had mentally sketched out a plan. Not just for immediate protection, but for untangling the complex web of financial manipulation Tom had woven around me. You look surprisingly calm, Ellie observed as she accepted the coffee mug I offered. I feel surprisingly calm, I admitted. For the first time in years, I'm seeing everything clearly. We spent the morning documenting Tom's nocturnal visit and preparing the restraining order application. Officer Ramirez arrived to take an official statement, his expression grim as he viewed the security footage. Mrs. Wilson, given what you've shared about the hiking incident and now this, I strongly recommend pursuing criminal charges, he advised. Attempted murder is a serious offense. I sighed, the weight of that decision heavy on my shoulders. Let me think about it. For now, I just want him legally required to stay away from me. Officer Ramirez nodded. The restraining order should be processed by this afternoon. In the meantime, I'll increase patrols in your neighborhood. After he left, Ellie fixed me with a stern look. Maggie, you need to consider what Officer Ramirez said, what Tom did, what he planned to do. It wasn't just theft. It was premeditated, attempted murder. I know, I said quietly. But he's still my son, no matter what he's done. Ellie softened. And you're still a mother. I understand. But your safety has to come first. I nodded, unable to articulate the complex tangle of emotions churning inside me. The maternal instinct to protect warring with the equally powerful instinct for self-preservation. My doorbell rang at noon precisely. Rich stood on the porch, toolbox in hand, his kind face brightening when I opened the door. Right on time, I greeted him. Always, he replied with a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. I brought sandwiches from Miller's Deli. Thought you might not feel up to cooking. The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched me. That's very kind. Come in. Ellie's here too. We ate lunch on the back porch, the autumn sunshine warming the wooden boards beneath our feet. I explained the morning's developments, including the restraining order application. Good, Rich said firmly. That's the right move. Is there anything else I can do to help secure the house? Actually, I began, hesitating slightly. There is something, but it's a bit unusual. I explained my idea, a subtle but significant modification to my home's security system. Rich listened attentively, his architect's mind clearly processing the technical aspects as I spoke. It's unorthodox, he admitted when I finished, but certainly doable. Are you sure it's necessary? I hope it isn't, I replied. But given what happened on the mountain, I need to be prepared for anything. He nodded, understanding without judgment. Let me make a supply run. I can have it done by evening. While Rich was out gathering materials, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Wilson? This is Jessica Lynn from Grand Rapids National Bank, Fraud Investigation Department. I wanted to update you on our findings regarding the unauthorized transfer from your account. I put the call on speaker so Ellie could hear. Yes, of course. What have you found? We've completed our investigation and confirmed that the signature on the transfer authorization was indeed forged. We'll be reversing the transaction and restoring the full amount to your account with interest. Relief washed over me. That's wonderful news. Thank you. There's more, Ms. Lynn continued. Given the amount involved and the clear evidence of forgery, we're required to file a criminal report with the authorities. An investigator will likely contact you for additional statements. I exchanged glances with Ellie, who gave me an encouraging nod. I understand. I'll cooperate fully. After hanging up, Ellie squeezed my hand. That's one victory. The money will be back in your account, and the bank's criminal report will strengthen any case against Tom, should you decide to pursue it. Or it might motivate him to make restitution before things go that far, I said, still hoping for some path that didn't end with my son in prison. Rich returned mid-afternoon with supplies and immediately set to work on the security modifications we'd discussed. The system he'd designed was elegant in its simplicity, a secondary layer of protection that would activate only under specific circumstances. By early evening, the restraining order had been granted, a temporary order of protection, requiring Tom to maintain at least 500 feet of distance from me, my home, and my vehicle. Officer Ramirez delivered the paperwork himself, along with confirmation that it had already been served to Tom at his office. He wasn't happy, Officer Ramirez reported. Made quite a scene, actually. His colleagues seemed unsurprised. I could imagine it all too well. Tom's face flushing with anger, his voice rising as he protested the injustice, the sideways glances from co-workers who had likely witnessed similar outbursts before. Thank you for handling this so quickly, I told Officer Ramirez. I appreciate everything you've done. He nodded, professional but compassionate. We take these matters very seriously, Mrs. Wilson. Don't hesitate to call if you have any concerns. After he left, Rich completed the final adjustments to the security system, walking me through its operation with patient detail. It's activated by this switch here, he explained, showing me a discrete panel installed near my bedroom door. Once it's on, the secondary system runs independently from the main house alarm. Even if someone deactivates the primary system, this one will continue functioning. Perfect, I said, mentally reviewing the sequence he'd demonstrated. And the alert goes directly to your phone. He nodded. And to Officer Ramirez, as we discussed. If it triggers, help will be on the way immediately. The thoroughness of his work moved me. Rich, I don't know how to thank you properly. No need, he said, his voice warm. Knowing you're safe is thanks enough. Ellie, who had been watching our interaction with barely concealed interest, chimed in. Rich, why don't you stay for dinner? I brought ingredients for pasta, and I think we could all use a relaxing evening. He accepted the invitation, and our impromptu dinner party became a much-needed respite from the tension of recent days. We avoided heavy topics, instead sharing stories about Ellie's grandchildren, Rich's latest community garden project, and my adventures in online art sales. For a few hours, the shadow of Tom's betrayal receded, allowing space for something lighter, something hopeful. Watching Rich laugh at one of Ellie's outrageous stories, his face open and genuine, I felt a spark of connection I hadn't experienced since Harold's death. After dinner, as Ellie gathered her things to leave, she pulled me aside. He's a good man, Maggie. Don't let what Tom did make you afraid to trust again. I felt a flush rise to my cheeks. It's not like that. We're just friends. She gave me a knowing smile. For now, maybe. But I haven't seen you laugh like that in years. Rich left shortly after Ellie, but not before checking the security system one final time. Standing on my porch, the night air crisp with approaching autumn, he hesitated. I know Officer Ramirez will be keeping an eye on the place, but I could sleep on your couch tonight if it would make you feel safer. The offer was tempting, but I shook my head. Thank you, but I'll be fine. Charlie's a light sleeper, and between the alarms and the cameras, I'm well protected. He nodded, respecting my decision. Call any time, day or night. I mean it. I will, I promised, and thank you again for everything. After he left, I secured the house, activated both security systems, and prepared for bed. Despite the day's tensions, I felt oddly at peace. The bank was returning my money. The restraining order was in place. My home was secure. One by one, I was reclaiming pieces of my life that had been leveraged against me. The next morning dawned clear and bright, sunshine pouring through my kitchen windows as I prepared breakfast. Charlie sat attentively at my feet, hoping for a morsel of bacon to fall his way. Not a chance, I told him fondly, though I did slip him a small piece when he wasn't looking. I had just poured my second cup of coffee when my phone rang, Rebecca's, name flashing on the screen. I stared at it, debating whether to answer, before finally accepting the call. Helen, she began, her voice honey-sweet in a way that immediately raised my suspicions. I hope I'm not calling too early. Not at all, I replied neutrally. What can I do for you, Rebecca? I wanted to apologize for the misunderstanding. At Eagle Ridge, things got so out of hand, and I feel just terrible about it. The performance was impressive. She hit all the right notes of contrition without actually admitting to anything specific. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I said calmly. Tom tried to kill me for insurance money. You were complicit. She gasped, the sound theatrically offended. Helen, that's an outrageous accusation. Tom loves you. We both do. He's been worried sick about your mental state lately. These paranoid delusions— Rebecca, I interrupted. Let's not waste each other's time. The restraining order has been served. The bank has confirmed the forgery and is returning my money. The insurance company is investigating the fraudulent policy. Those aren't delusions. They're facts. A beat of silence, then her voice changed, the saccharine sweetness replaced by something harder. You're making a terrible mistake. This will destroy Tom's career, his reputation, everything he's worked for. Tom made his own choices, I replied. Now he can live with the consequences. And what about your choices? She countered. Turning against your own son? What kind of mother does that? The barb was precisely targeted, hitting the vulnerability she knew existed. But I had anticipated this approach. The kind who refuses to be a victim, I answered steadily. The kind who values her life enough to protect it, even from her own child. Rebecca's voice dropped to a near whisper. You'll regret this, Helen. When you're old and alone, with no family left to care for you, you'll remember this conversation and wish you'd made a different choice. I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who see me as nothing more than a financial resource to be exploited, I said. Goodbye, Rebecca. I ended the call before she could respond, my hand trembling slightly despite my resolved tone. Her words had found their mark, touching on fears I'd carried since Harold's death. Fears of aging alone, of isolation, of becoming irrelevant and forgotten. Charlie nudged my hand with his nose, sensing my distress. I stroked his soft head, drawing comfort from his uncomplicated affection. We'll be fine, I told him. Both of us. The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. Through the security app on my phone, I could see Ellie standing on my porch, an oversized tote bag slung over her shoulder. Morning sunshine, she greeted as I opened the door. I come bearing legal paperwork and blueberry muffins. A perfect combination, I laughed, welcoming her inside. We spread the documents across my dining table, statements for the restraining order, affidavits for the bank fraud case, paperwork for updating my will and estate plan. My contact at the insurance company called this morning, Ellie said as she sorted through the files. They're not just canceling the fraudulent policy, they're filing their own criminal complaint. Apparently, they take a very dim view of policies obtained through misrepresentation. I nodded, not entirely surprised. What happens next, legally speaking? A lot depends on what you want to happen, Ellie replied carefully. The evidence for criminal charges is substantial, but pursuing that path would mean a public court case, testimony, possibly a trial, all with Tom as the defendant. The image made my stomach clench. No matter what he'd done, some part of me still remembered him as the little boy who had once climbed into my lap during thunderstorms, seeking comfort and protection. What are my alternatives? I asked. We could approach this as a civil matter instead. Sue for financial damages, emotional distress. That might pressure Tom into a settlement, returning the money, covering your legal fees, agreeing to ongoing restrictions to protect you. I considered this option, turning it over in my mind. And that would avoid criminal charges? Ellie hesitated. Possibly. It would be up to the prosecutor whether to pursue a criminal case, even if you don't press charges yourself. But your wishes would certainly be taken into consideration. I sighed, the weight of the decision heavy on my shoulders. Let me think about it. We spent the next few hours completing paperwork, organizing evidence, and creating a comprehensive timeline of events for my attorney. The methodical work was almost therapeutic, transforming the chaotic betrayal into orderly documentation. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Rich. Stopping by the garden center for fall bulbs. Want to join? Fresh air might do you good. The invitation was tempting. After days of tension and paperwork, the thought of wandering among flowers, planning for next spring's blooms felt like a glimpse of normalcy. Go, Ellie encouraged when I showed her the message. I can finish up here. You deserve a break. I hesitated, aware of the restraining order that should keep Tom at bay, but still wary of leaving my secured home. What if you spend every day jumping at shadows? Ellie interrupted gently. That's no way to live, Maggie. The security systems are in place. The legal wheels are turning. Take a few hours to remember there's still beauty in the world. She was right. Of course, I couldn't let fear confine me to these walls, however safe they might be. I texted Rich back. Would love to. Can you pick me up in 30? His response came immediately. Absolutely. See you soon. The garden center was an explosion of autumn. Colors, chrysanthemums in burnt orange and deep burgundy, ornamental cabbages in purple and cream, pumpkins in every size imaginable. Rich guided me through the displays with infectious enthusiasm, pointing out rare varieties and sharing planting tips. These allium bulbs would look spectacular along your front walkway, he suggested, holding up a package. They'll bloom in late spring, tall purple globes that last for weeks. I added them to our growing collection, along with tulips, daffodils, and hyacinths. There was something profoundly hopeful about planting bulbs in the fall, an act of faith that winter would eventually yield to spring, that beneath the frozen ground, new life would be preparing to emerge. As we loaded our purchases into Rich's truck, a familiar voice called my name. I turned to see Dr. Martinez approaching from the Garden Center Cafe. Maggie, how wonderful to see you, she greeted warmly. And outside the examination room, no less. I introduced her to Rich, noting the approving gleam in her eye as she shook his hand. I was just thinking about you, Dr. Martinez said. I received a rather strange call yesterday from a woman claiming to be your daughter-in-law. She was extremely concerned about your mental health, suggesting you might be experiencing paranoid delusions. My stomach tightened. Rebecca. Dr. Martinez nodded. She was quite insistent that I should consider having you evaluated for cognitive decline. Even suggested a specific facility that specializes in geriatric psychiatric care. Rich's expression darkened beside me. That's outrageous. It certainly was, Dr. Martinez agreed. Especially given the comprehensive evaluation I performed just last week, which showed you to be in excellent health, both physically and mentally. What did you tell her? I asked. That patient confidentiality prevented me from discussing your medical information, but that I had no concerns about your cognitive function whatsoever. She smiled mischievously. I may also have mentioned that making false claims about someone's mental health could potentially constitute defamation. I laughed despite myself. I'd have loved to hear her response to that. It was educational, Dr. Martinez said dryly. But Maggie, in all seriousness, be careful. This type of behavior, attempting to create a false narrative about your mental competence, it suggests they're getting desperate. Rich placed a protective hand on my shoulder. We're taking all necessary precautions. Dr. Martinez nodded approvingly. Good. And Maggie, I've made detailed notes in your medical file about this incident, as well as your recent evaluation results. If anyone tries to challenge your competence, the documentation is crystal clear. I thanked her sincerely, feeling newly grateful for allies who had emerged during this crisis. Ellie with her legal knowledge, Rich with his practical support, and now Dr. Martinez with her professional authority. As we drove away from the garden center, Rich glanced my way. You have quite a team forming around you. I do, don't I? I reflected, surprised by the realization. For someone who was worried about being alone, I seemed to be collecting quite a circle of defenders. He smiled. People care about you, Maggie. Not because of what you can give them, but because of who you are. The contrast with Tom and Rebecca's transactional view of relationships wasn't lost on me. For them, I had value only insofar as I could provide financial benefit. For my friends, my worth was intrinsic, not measured in dollars and cents. When we returned to my house, Ellie's car was gone, but she'd left a note on the dining table. Took the paperwork to the attorney's office. Everything's filed. Take the evening off. You've earned it. Call me tomorrow. XOXO. Rich insisted on helping me plant the bulbs we'd purchased, and I gratefully accepted. We spent the next few hours digging in my garden, carefully placing each bulb at the proper depth, covering them with soil that would protect them through the coming winter. There, Rich said with satisfaction as we patted down the last bed. Come spring, this place will be a riot of color. I surveyed our work, imagining the flowers that would emerge months from now. Something to look forward to. He hesitated, brushing dirt from his hands. Maggie, would you consider joining me for dinner tonight? Nothing fancy. There's a little Italian place downtown I've been meaning to try. The invitation caught me by surprise, though perhaps it shouldn't have. The connection between us had been building gradually, but unmistakably, over recent weeks. I'd like that, I said, surprising myself with how true the words felt. His face brightened. Wonderful. Shall we say 7? I agreed, and he left to go home and change, promising to return in a few hours. After he'd gone, I indulged in a long, hot shower, washing away the garden soil and, symbolically, the residual stress of recent days. Standing before my closet, I surveyed options I hadn't considered in years. Harold had been gone 5 years, and while I'd continued living, I realized I'd stopped making an effort to truly enjoy life. Tonight felt like crossing a threshold, choosing to step forward into whatever came next, rather than remaining tethered to painful pasts. I selected a deep blue dress I hadn't worn since before Harold's illness, pleased to find it still fit perfectly. A touch of mascara, a hint of blush, pearl earrings Harold had given me for our 30th anniversary. Small choices that felt significant in their deliberateness. Charlie watched my preparations with curious eyes, head tilted as if trying to understand this deviation from our usual evening routine. Don't worry, I assured him, scratching behind his ears. I'll be home later. And I'll bring you leftover Italian. The doorbell rang precisely at 7. Rich stood on my porch, crisp in a navy blazer, holding a small bouquet of deep red chrysanthemums, the same variety we'd admired at the garden center earlier. You look beautiful, he said simply. So do the flowers, I replied, accepting them with a smile. Let me put these in water before we go. As I arranged the chrysanthemums in a crystal vase, a wedding gift from decades ago, I was struck by the unexpected turns life had taken. A month ago, I had been living in comfortable routine, unaware of the betrayal brewing beneath the surface of my relationship with Tom. Now, I was preparing for a legal battle against my own son, while simultaneously opening myself to new possibilities. I hadn't imagined. The dichotomy was jarring but also clarifying. Life rarely unfolded according to plan. The question was not whether difficulties would arise, but how we would respond when they did. Dinner was lovelier than I could have anticipated. The restaurant was indeed small, just 12 tables in a converted historic home with exposed brick walls and soft lighting from iron chandeliers. Rich was attentive without being overbearing, sharing stories of his career as an architect, his passion for community development, and the loss of his wife Alice to cancer 2 years prior. The hardest part wasn't the end, he confided as we shared tiramisu for dessert. It was the months after, when the casseroles stopped coming and everyone else returned to normal life, while I was still trying to figure out what normal even meant anymore. I nodded, understanding perfectly. For me, it was the silence. Harold and I were always comfortable not talking, but the silence after he was gone felt different, emptier, somehow. Exactly, Rich agreed. Alice and I could sit reading for hours without speaking, but it was a shared silence. After she died, the house just felt hollow. The conversation should have been melancholy, but instead, it felt like recognition. Two people who understood a particular kind of loss, finding unexpected comfort in shared experience. When he drove me home, the night was clear and cool, stars scattered across the sky in brilliant constellations. Rich walked me to my door, maintaining a respectful distance that I found both old-fashioned and endearing. Thank you for tonight, I said as I unlocked my front door. It was exactly what I needed. For me as well, he replied. Perhaps we could do it again sometime? The hopefulness in his voice made me smile. I'd like that very much. Charlie greeted me enthusiastically as I entered, circling my legs and sniffing with great interest at the cardboard container of leftover pasta I'd brought home for him. Yes, I remembered, I laughed, setting it on the counter while I changed into more comfortable clothes. As I prepared for bed, a sense of contentment settled over me. Not the complacent comfort of my pre-crisis life, but something more, resilient. I had faced betrayal and responded not with collapse, but with courage. I had discovered strengths I hadn't known I possessed, and allies I hadn't realized were waiting. Whatever came next with Tom, legal proceedings, potential reconciliation, or permanent estrangement, I would face it on my terms, not his. My phone chimed with a text from Ellie. How was dinner? Details tomorrow, please. I smiled, typing back, lovely, and yes to details. Good night, friend. As I drifted toward sleep, Charlie curled at the foot of my bed. I found myself thinking not about Tom's betrayal or the painful road ahead, but about spring bulbs nestled in dark soil, quietly preparing to bloom when the time was right. Next morning, I woke to the chime of my phone, an email notification from my bank. The fraudulent transfer had been reversed, with interest. The full $175,000 was back in my account. I sat on the edge of my bed, Charlie stretching beside me, and allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction. One piece of my life reclaimed. As I sipped my morning coffee on the porch, watching mist rise from the lake, my phone rang again. My attorney, Grace Winters. Good morning, Maggie. I hope I'm not calling too early. Not at all, I assured her. I've been up for hours. I have some developments to share. The district attorney's office reviewed the evidence we submitted regarding the insurance fraud and the Eagle Ridge incident. They're taking it very seriously. My stomach tightened. How seriously? They're considering criminal charges, insurance fraud, forgery, attempted murder. These are major felonies, Maggie. The prosecutor wants to know if you'll cooperate with their investigation. The question I'd been dreading had arrived. Despite everything Tom had done, the thought of him facing criminal charges, possibly prison, sent a wave of maternal anguish through me. "Do I have to decide immediately?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. "No," Grace replied gently, "but they'll need your answer within the week. The evidence is substantial even without your testimony, but your cooperation would strengthen their case considerably." "And if I choose not to cooperate?" A pause. "That's your right, but the DA might proceed anyway, especially with the insurance company pushing for prosecution. And without your input, you'd have less influence over how the case unfolds." I thanked her for the information and promised to consider my options carefully. After hanging up, I sat motionless, watching a pair of cardinals flit among my garden shrubs, their bright plumage stark against the autumn foliage. The choice before me seemed impossible. Cooperate with prosecution, potentially sending my son to prison, or stand aside, allowing whatever justice system machinery had been set in motion to proceed without my guidance. Neither option felt right. Neither acknowledged the complex tangle of love and betrayal, protection and self-preservation that defined the situation. My doorbell interrupted these troubled thoughts. Through the security app, I saw Ellie standing on my porch, 2 coffee cups in hand, an expectant smile on her face. "I figured you might need reinforcements this morning," she said when I opened the door. "Grace mentioned she'd be calling you about the DA's decision." "News travels fast," I observed, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Small towns," Ellie shrugged. "So, spill it. How was dinner with Rich?" The abrupt change of subject was clearly intentional, a friend's effort to temporarily lift the weight of harder decisions. I allowed it, describing the intimate restaurant, our conversation, the comfortable connection we'd shared. "I knew it," Ellie declared triumphantly. "The way he looks at you, like you're the most fascinating person he's ever met. It's quite something to witness." I felt a blush rising to my cheeks. "It's just dinner, Ellie. Let's not get carried away." "A first dinner," she corrected with a wink. "The first of many, if the glow on your face is any indication." We chatted about lighter matters for a while. Her grandchildren's upcoming visit, plans for Thanksgiving, the community garden's fall harvest festival. But eventually, the conversation circled back to the decision looming before me. "What are you thinking about the DA's request?" Ellie asked gently. I sighed, setting down my empty coffee cup. "I honestly don't know. Part of me wants Tom to face consequences, real ones, that he can't charm or manipulate his way out of. But another part still remembers him as your little boy," Ellie finished for me. "Exactly. And wonders where I went wrong, what I could have done differently." Ellie's expression grew stern. "Maggie Wilson, you stop that right now. Tom is a grown man who made his choices. Calculated, deliberate choices to steal from you, to plan harm against you. That's not on you. That's on him." "But if I'd been firmer when he was younger, set better boundaries." "No," Ellie interrupted firmly. "That's Rebecca talking, or your own guilt. Good people can raise children who make terrible choices. That's been true since Cain and Abel." Her bluntness startled a laugh from me. "That's quite a biblical reference." "Well, it fits. You can love Tom and still hold him accountable. In fact, that might be the most loving thing you can do at this point." I considered her words carefully. "What would you do if it were your son?" Ellie didn't hesitate. "I'd cooperate with prosecution, not out of vengeance, but because actions have consequences. Because protecting him from those consequences hasn't helped him become a better person. It's enabled him to become a worse one." The truth of her assessment hit home. For years, I'd shielded Tom from the natural outcomes of his choices, paying off debts, making excuses, pretending not to notice the patterns of manipulation. And where had it led? To a cliff edge at Eagle Ridge, with my son calculating the physics of my fall. "You're right," I said finally. "I need to call Grace back." After Ellie left, I dialed my attorney's number, my resolve firm despite the ache in my heart. "Grace, it's Maggie Wilson. I've made my decision. I'll cooperate with the district attorney's investigation." Her response was professionally approving. "I think that's the right choice, Maggie. I'll let them know immediately. They'll want to schedule a formal interview soon." The rest of the day passed in a blur of practical tasks: gardening, laundry, organizing my studio, physical activities that kept my hands busy while my mind processed the weight of my decision. By evening, a sense of peace had settled over me, not because the choice was easy, but because it was necessary. I was just preparing dinner when my phone chimed with a text from my neighbor across the street. "Maggie, there's a woman sitting in a black sedan outside your house. Been there about 20 minutes. Everything okay?" My pulse quickened as I checked the security cameras. Sure enough, a dark car was parked across the street, just beyond my property line, technically honoring the restraining order's 500-foot requirement, but close enough to maintain surveillance. I zoomed in on the driver, Rebecca. So they had moved to the next phase, monitoring my movements, perhaps hoping to intimidate me into dropping the restraining order or withdrawing cooperation with the investigation. I texted back my thanks to my neighbor, assuring her I was aware of the situation. Then I called Officer Ramirez, explaining what was happening. "She's not technically violating the restraining order," he confirmed after hearing my description. "But it's definitely harassment. I'll drive by and have a word with her." 20 minutes later, his patrol car pulled alongside Rebecca's sedan. I watched through the security camera as he approached her window. Their conversation was brief. Rebecca gesticulated animatedly, then finally started her engine and drove away, face tight with frustration. Officer Ramirez came to my door afterward. She claimed she was just admiring the neighborhood architecture. I informed her that lingering near your property, regardless of the exact distance, could be construed as stalking or intimidation, which would strengthen the case for extending the restraining order indefinitely. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "I appreciate your help." "It's no trouble," he assured me, "but you should know, this type of behavior often escalates before it subsides. They're testing boundaries, seeing what they can get away with." The warning was sobering but not surprising. Tom and Rebecca had lost their direct access to me and, by extension, to the financial resources they'd come to view as their entitlement. People accustomed to getting their way rarely accept such losses gracefully. That evening, I received a text from Rich. "Just checking in. Everything okay?" The simple message warmed me. Small drama with Rebecca watching the house, but Officer Ramirez handled it. All quiet now. His response came quickly. "Good. Would it help if I came over? I make a decent bodyguard and an excellent chess player." I smiled at the offer. "Rain. Check on chess. Been a long day, but thank you for asking." "Anytime. Sleep well, Maggie." The next morning brought a formal request from the district attorney's office for an interview the following day. I confirmed the appointment, then began preparing mentally for the ordeal of recounting Tom's betrayal in official documented detail. The day passed uneventfully until mid-afternoon, when my phone rang with Tom's number. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. He knew about the restraining order, knew he wasn't supposed to contact me. This deliberate violation suggested either desperation or a strategic move I hadn't anticipated. After 4 rings, I answered, putting the call on speaker and immediately activating the recording function on my phone, a habit I'd developed since Eagle Ridge. "Tom, you know you're not supposed to be calling me." "Mom, please." His voice sounded strained, ragged. "You have to stop this. The DA's office called me in for questioning." They're talking about criminal charges. Criminal charges, Mom. Do you have any idea what that would do to my career? My life? The raw panic in his voice tugged at my heart, despite everything. You should be talking to your lawyer, Tom, not me. My lawyer says I'm looking at serious time, he continued, ignoring my response. Years, potentially. Because of what? A misunderstanding on a hiking trail? A financial arrangement you didn't fully grasp? The attempt to minimize his actions, to reframe attempted murder as a misunderstanding and forgery as a financial arrangement, reignited my resolve. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Tom. You took out a life insurance policy on me without my knowledge. You stole $175,000 from my accounts. You tried to push me off a cliff. Those are facts, not misinterpretations. I didn't, he began, then stopped abruptly. When he continued, his voice had shifted to something softer, more vulnerable. Mom, I've made mistakes. I know that. I got in over my head with some gambling debts, and I panicked. But I would never have actually hurt you. You know that, right? The cliff thing. That was just Rebecca's crazy idea. I was never going to go through with it. The blame shifting was so transparent it would have been laughable if it weren't so tragic. Tom, I can't have this conversation. You're violating the restraining order just by calling me. Forget the restraining order, he snapped, the facade of contrition instantly evaporating. This is about family, about loyalty. What kind of mother sends her own son to prison? The accusation struck its intended target, but this time I was prepared for it. The kind who recognizes that real love includes accountability. The kind who understands that protecting you from consequences hasn't helped you become a better person. Oh, spare me the maternal wisdom, he snarled. This isn't about making me a better person. This is about punishment, revenge. No, Tom, it's about justice. About facing the natural outcomes of your choices. A long silence followed, broken only by his ragged breathing. When he spoke again, his voice had turned cold, calculating. Fine. If that's how you want to play this, remember I know things. Too, like how depressed you were after Dad died. How you talked about not wanting to go on without him. How you were on medication. Maybe I took out that policy because I was worried about your mental state. Maybe I was trying to protect you from yourself. The implied threat was clear. If I continued cooperating with prosecution, he would paint me as mentally unstable, possibly suicidal, creating an alternative narrative to explain his actions. That's your choice, Tom, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the spike of anger his words provoked. But Dr. Martinez has already documented my excellent mental health, and there are records of your gambling debts and financial problems that establish clear motive. The truth has a way of emerging. Another silence, longer this time. Then, unexpectedly, a sob broke through the phone. Mom, please, I'm begging you. Don't do this. For a moment I hesitated, the sound of my son's distress piercing through, layers of protective resolve. But then I remembered the cold calculation in his eyes at Eagle Ridge, the dismissive way he'd spoken about me to Rebecca, believing I couldn't hear. I'm sorry, Tom. I truly am. But this isn't something I'm doing to you. It's something you've done to yourself. I ended the call, hands trembling slightly. Immediately, I forwarded the recording to Grace, along with a note explaining the restraining order violation. Then I sat at my kitchen table, breathing deeply, centering myself in the certainty that while painful, my decision was necessary. The formal interview at the district attorney's office the next day was grueling but thorough. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Marianne Chen, recorded my statement about the Eagle Ridge incident, the insurance policy, the forged bank transfers, and Tom's pattern of financial exploitation. She seemed particularly interested in Rebecca's role, taking detailed notes about her participation in the hiking trip and her subsequent harassment. "Mrs. Wilson, your testimony is extremely helpful," Ms. Chen said as we concluded. "Combined with the documentary evidence and the recordings you've provided, we have a strong case. I want to be transparent with you. We'll be seeking indictments against both your son and his wife." I nodded, the reality of what this meant settling heavily on my shoulders. "What happens next?" "The case will go to the grand jury next week. If they return indictments, as I expect they will, arrest warrants will be issued. Your son and his wife will be taken into custody, arraigned, and bail will be determined." The clinical description of the process made it seem both more real and more surreal. In just days, Tom and Rebecca could be arrested, fingerprinted, photographed for mugshots, all the procedural indignities of criminal processing applied to my own child. "And after that?" I asked quietly. "Most likely, they'll seek a plea agreement. The evidence is substantial, and jury trials for attempted murder and fraud carry significant risks for defendants. A plea would reduce their potential sentences, but would require admission of guilt. Admission of guilt. Something Tom had skillfully avoided his entire life, from childhood scrapes to adult transgressions. I wondered if he would accept it now, faced with the alternative of a trial and potentially longer sentence. "Thank you for explaining everything," I said, gathering my purse to leave. "And for handling this matter with sensitivity." Ms. Chen nodded, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "Mrs. Wilson, if I may say so, your composure throughout this process has been remarkable. Many parents in your position would have refused to cooperate, regardless of the evidence. Your courage is commendable." The unexpected praise brought tears to my eyes. "It doesn't feel like courage. It feels like failure." "It's not," she assured me firmly. "You raised your son, provided for him, gave him opportunities. The choices he made with those advantages are his responsibility, not yours." I left the prosecutor's office feeling emotionally drained but strangely lighthearted, as if some invisible burden had been set down. The weight of Tom's betrayal remained, but the added weight of inappropriate guilt, the notion that his moral failings were somehow my responsibility, had begun to lift. That evening, Rich called to check on me. When I described the day's interview and its emotional toll, he listened without interruption, offering neither platitudes nor judgments. "Would a distraction help?" he asked finally. "The community garden is hosting a harvest dinner tomorrow night. Good food, good company, no heavy conversations unless you want them." The invitation was exactly what I needed. An opportunity to step away from the intensity of recent events and remember that life consisted of more than betrayal and legal proceedings. "That sounds perfect," I told him. "What time should you pick me up?" The harvest dinner was held in the garden itself, long tables set up between rows of autumn vegetables, strings of lights creating a warm, festive atmosphere despite the chill in the air. Community members had contributed dishes featuring produce they'd grown, roasted root vegetables, squash soups, apple pies, and fresh bread. Rich introduced me to friends and fellow gardeners, his hand occasionally resting lightly on the small of my back in a gesture that felt both protective and affectionate. I found myself relaxing into the simple pleasure of shared food and conversation, topics ranging from composting techniques to local politics to favorite books. No one mentioned Tom or the rumors that had inevitably begun circulating in our small Tandine. Here, surrounded by people who knew me primarily through Rich and our shared interest in gardening, I was simply Maggie. Not the mother of a son facing criminal charges, not the target of a thwarted murder plot, just a woman enjoying an autumn evening among friends. As the gathering wound down, Rich and I volunteered to help with cleanup. Side by side, we collected plates and folded tablecloths, working in comfortable tandem as if we'd done this dozens of times before. "Thank you for this," I said as we walked to his truck afterward. It was exactly what I needed. He smiled, the expression visible even in the dim parking lot lighting. I'm glad. Sometimes we need reminders that most of the world is filled with decent people just trying to do their best. The observation was simple but profound, highlighting the contrast between the calculated malice I'd encountered from Tom and the genuine warmth of this community gathering. We drove back to my house in comfortable silence, the radio playing softly in the background. When he pulled into my driveway, Rich turned to face me, his expression thoughtful. Maggie, I want to say something, and I hope it doesn't sound presumptuous. Go ahead, I encouraged, curious. What you're doing, holding Tom accountable even though it breaks your heart, it's one of the bravest things I've ever witnessed. And it makes me admire you even more than I already did. The unexpected praise brought a rush of emotion to my throat. I don't feel brave. Most of the time, I feel like I'm navigating in the dark, making decisions I never imagined having to make. That's what courage looks like, he said gently. Not fearlessness, but moving forward anyway, doing what's right even when it hurts. As he walked me to my door, the space between us seemed charged with unspoken possibilities. Standing on my porch, keys in hand, I made a decision that felt both spontaneous and long considered. Would you like to come in for coffee? Or maybe something stronger? His smile deepened. I'd like that very much. The evening that followed was a revelation, conversation flowing effortlessly from serious topics to humorous anecdotes, silence comfortable rather than awkward. We discovered shared tastes in music and films, similar political leanings, and a mutual love for mystery novels. When Rich finally rose to leave, nearly midnight by the clock on my mantel, there was a moment of delicious tension. The unspoken question of how this evening should end. He solved it by taking my hand and kissing it gently, an old-fashioned gesture that somehow felt more intimate than a more conventional goodnight kiss might have been. Dinner again soon? He asked. I'd like that, I replied, walking him to the door. Very much. After he left, I moved through my nighttime routine with a sense of quiet contentment, the specter of Tom's betrayal temporarily relegated to the background. As I slipped into bed, Charlie settling at my feet, my phone chimed with a text from Ellie. How was the harvest dinner? Spill all the details tomorrow. I smiled, typing back a brief response. Lovely evening. Coffee tomorrow at 10? Sleep came easily that night, deep and dreamless. I woke to sunlight filtering through my curtains and Charlie's gentle nudging, ready for his morning walk. The simple domesticity of these moments, brewing coffee, feeding my dog, checking the weather forecast, felt precious in their ordinariness, a reminder that life continued even amid extraordinary circumstances. Over coffee with Ellie later that morning, I recounted the harvest dinner and my evening with Rich, watching her expression shift from eager curiosity to genuine delight. I knew it, she declared triumphantly. The way he looks at you, like you hung the moon and stars. It's been obvious for weeks. I laughed, feeling a blush rise to my cheeks. We're taking it slow. We're both still figuring out what it means to start something new at our age, after the losses we've experienced. Slow is fine, Ellie agreed. As long as you're moving forward, not standing still out of fear. Her words resonated beyond their immediate context, applying equally to my personal life and to the difficult path I'd chosen regarding Tom. In both cases, moving forward, however cautiously, was preferable to paralysis. Our conversation was interrupted by a call from Grace, my attorney. Maggie, I wanted you to hear this from me first. The grand jury returned indictments this morning against both Thomas and Rebecca Wilson. Multiple counts for each of them, including conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and grand theft. Arrest warrants have been issued. Despite having anticipated this outcome, the reality of it hit me with unexpected force. When will they be arrested? Today, most likely. Sheriff's Department has already been notified. I wanted you to be prepared. This will probably make local news. I thanked her for the advance notice and hung up, sharing the development with Ellie, whose expression reflected both satisfaction and concern. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. "I think so," I replied, surprised to find it was mostly true. "It's painful, but it's also final in a way. The decision is made. The process is in motion. What happens next is no longer in my hands." She nodded, understanding what I meant. "What will you do today?" I considered the question, feeling an unexpected surge of determination. "Paint. I haven't touched my watercolors in weeks. There's a commission I've been putting off. A lakeside scene for a client in Chicago. Today seems like the right time to start it." The act of returning to my art felt symbolic, reclaiming not just my financial resources but also my creative energy, my ability to find beauty and meaning even in difficult circumstances. Ellie squeezed my hand before leaving. "That's perfect. Create something beautiful today, Maggie. That's its own form of victory." Alone in my studio, surrounded by the familiar sense of paint and paper, I lost myself in the work, mixing colors, applying washes, building layers of pigment that gradually coalesced into a tranquil lakeside vista. Autumn trees reflected in still water. The hours passed unnoticed as I focused on this act of creation, this affirmation of life continuing despite all that had transpired. I was adding final details when my phone rang. Officer Ramirez calling to inform me that Tom and Rebecca had been taken into custody without incident. "They surrendered peacefully at their home," he reported. "They're being processed now and will appear before a judge for arraignment tomorrow morning." "Thank you for letting me know," I said quietly. After hanging up, I returned to my painting, adding touches of gold to the reflected trees, enhancing the sense of light filtering through autumn foliage. The work was nearly complete. Not perfect, perhaps, but honest and true to my vision. As I cleaned my brushes and tidied my workspace, a text arrived from Rich. "Thinking of you today. Would you like company this evening?" I smiled, typing back, "Yes. Bring takeout, Chinese or Thai, your choice." His response came immediately. "Thai it is. See you at 7. Setting down my phone, I gazed at the finished painting, a peaceful scene that had emerged from a day that began with news of indictments and arrests. There was a lesson in that juxtaposition, a reminder that beauty and difficulty often coexisted, sometimes even arising from the same circumstances. Tom and Rebecca were facing the consequences of their actions. I was facing the reality of a relationship permanently altered, perhaps irreparably broken. But I was also discovering new connections, new possibilities, new strengths within myself that might never have emerged without this painful catalyst. As I looked out my studio window toward the lake, watching light play across the water's surface, I felt not happiness exactly, but a profound sense of rightness, of having chosen the difficult but necessary path, of honoring truth, even when it hurt. That choice had cost me a son as I had known him, but it had also, unexpectedly, returned me to myself. The morning of Tom and Rebecca's arraignment dawned clear and cold, a crystalline November day with frost edging the fallen leaves in my garden. I stood at my kitchen window, coffee cooling in my hands, considering whether to attend the court proceeding. Grace had explained I wasn't required to be there, but the option remained. Part of me wanted to witness this formal acknowledgement of what had happened, to see the system recognize the gravity of their actions. Another part recoiled at the thought of seeing Tom in handcuffs, standing before a judge like a common criminal. My son. My only child. Despite everything, that biological and emotional connection remained, a stubborn fact I couldn't erase. The doorbell's chime interrupted my thoughts. Through the security app, I saw Ellie on my porch, bundled against the morning chill. "I figured you might be contemplating the arraignment," she said when I opened the door. Thought you could use a second opinion. I smiled weakly, gesturing her inside. Am I that predictable? To someone who's known you for 40 years? Absolutely. She unwound her scarf, hanging it on the coat rack. So, are you going? I sighed, returning to the kitchen to refresh my coffee. I don't know. What do you think? Ellie considered the question carefully, accepting the mug I offered. I think attending might provide closure, but it also might be unnecessarily painful. There's no right answer here, Maggie. What would you do? I pressed. I wouldn't go, she said finally. Not because you're afraid, but because you don't need to see them brought low to validate your experience. Their actions, your pain, the betrayal, it all happened, regardless of what unfolds in that courtroom today. Her perspective resonated with something I'd been feeling but hadn't fully articulated. My healing didn't depend on witnessing their humiliation. Justice would proceed whether I was present or not. You're right, I decided. I'm not going. But I do want to do something productive today. Something that moves me forward rather than keeps me dwelling on the past. Ellie's face brightened. I have just the thing. The community center is looking for someone to teach watercolor classes for seniors. 2 hours, once a week. I might have mentioned your name. The suggestion caught me by surprise. Teaching? I haven't taught anything since that summer art program for kids years ago. Exactly. It's perfect. Sharing your talent, connecting with others, creating something new. The director was thrilled when I mentioned you might be interested. I hesitated, considering the commitment. When would it start? Next week. They already have 8 people signed up, just waiting for confirmation on an instructor. The timing felt significant, a new beginning coinciding with the formal closure of this painful chapter with Tom. Tell them yes, I decided. I'd love to do it. Ellie's smile was triumphant. I already had a feeling you would. After she left, I decided to channel my nervous energy into organizing supplies for the upcoming classes. Sorting through my art materials proved surprisingly therapeutic, separating usable brushes from those beyond repair, arranging paints by color family, preparing demonstration sheets of basic techniques I would teach. Around noon, my phone rang, Grace calling with an update from the arraignment. Both Tom and Rebecca entered initial pleas of not guilty, she reported. Standard procedure at this stage. Bail was set at $500,000 each, with conditions including surrender of passports and electronic monitoring if released. Will they make bail? I asked, uncertain how to feel about the prospect of them being released before trial. Unlikely, at least immediately, Grace replied. Their assets have been frozen as part of the fraud investigation. Unless they have access to funds we're unaware of, they'll remain in custody for now. The news brought conflicting emotions, relief that they wouldn't be free to continue harassment, sadness at the reality of my son in a jail cell, and a strange, hollow sensation that might have been closure but felt more like exhaustion. The prosecutor mentioned that with the evidence mounting, they'll likely seek a plea agreement rather than go to trial. Grace continued. If that happens, you'll be consulted about the terms. I thanked her for the update and hung up, trying to envision what an acceptable plea agreement might look like. Prison time seemed inevitable given the severity of the charges, but how much would be appropriate? What punishment would serve justice without feeling like vengeance? These questions had no easy answers, and ultimately, they weren't solely mine to determine. The justice system would follow its own protocols, balancing punishment, deterrence, and rehabilitation according to established guidelines. My role now was to focus on my own path forward, the teaching opportunity, my continuing art commissions, the tentative relationship blooming with Rich, and the supportive friendships that had sustained me through this crisis. That evening, Rich came over with homemade vegetable soup and fresh bread from the local bakery. We ate on the porch despite the chill wrapped in blankets. watching the sun set over the lake in spectacular shades of orange and pink. I didn't go to the arraignment, I told him as darkness settled around us. Decided it wouldn't help me move forward. He nodded approvingly. Sounds like the right choice for you. How are you feeling about everything? I considered the question carefully, wanting to give an honest answer. Like I'm standing at a crossroads. Behind me is everything familiar, including pain I've carried far too long. Ahead is uncertainty, but also possibility. It's both terrifying and exhilarating. Rich reached across the small table between us, taking my hand in his. Crossroads are where the most interesting journeys begin, and you don't have to navigate this one alone. The simple assurance warmed me more than the blanket draped across my shoulders. I'm beginning to understand that. For so long, I thought independence meant handling everything by myself. Now I'm learning that true strength often means allowing others to support you. Exactly, he agreed. And for what it's worth, you're doing a remarkable job of navigating this impossible situation with grace and dignity. We sat in comfortable silence as stars emerged in the darkening sky, his hand still holding mine, a tangible connection that required no words. The next morning brought an unexpected call from the district attorney's office. Marianne Chen, the II prosecutor handling Tom's case, wanted to meet with me as soon as possible. Her tone was professional, but carried an undercurrent of urgency that set my nerves on edge. Is something wrong? I asked. Nothing's wrong, she assured me. But there's been a development I'd prefer to discuss in person. Would 2 o'clock this afternoon work for you? I agreed to the meeting, then spent the morning distracted by speculation. Had new evidence emerged? Had the charges changed? Was a plea agreement already on the table? By the time I arrived at Ms. Chen's office, my imagination had constructed a dozen different scenarios, none of them particularly reassuring. Her assistant showed me directly into a conference room where Ms. Chen waited, a folder of documents on the table before her. Mrs. Wilson, thank you for coming on such short notice, she greeted me, gesturing to a chair. As I mentioned, there's been a significant development in your son's case. I sat, steeling myself for whatever might come next. Please, tell me what's happening. This morning, Thomas's attorney contacted us with an unusual request. Your son wants to speak with you, directly, not through counsel. He's offering to provide a full confession and agree to our proposed plea terms, but only after meeting with you face to face. The request was so unexpected that for a moment I couldn't formulate a response. He wants to see me? Why? Ms. Chen spread her hands. He wouldn't say specifically. His attorney suggested it was personal, not procedural. And if I refuse? That's entirely your right, she assured me. You're under no obligation to agree to this meeting. The case will proceed either way. I tried to imagine Tom's motivation. Was this a genuine desire for reconciliation? A last attempt at manipulation? Something in between? What are the proposed plea terms? I asked. Ms. Chen opened the folder before her. In exchange for guilty pleas on all counts, we're offering 15 years for Thomas, with possibility of parole after serving 8. For Rebecca, 10 years with possibility of parole after 5, reflecting her secondary role in the conspiracy. The numbers felt simultaneously excessive and insufficient. Too many years of life consumed by incarceration, yet somehow inadequate. To address the profound breach of trust their actions represented. And this is acceptable to them? I asked. To Rebecca, yes. She's already agreed, pending your son's decision. Thomas indicated he would accept it, but only after speaking with you. I sat quietly, weighing the request. Part of me feared another manipulation, another emotional ambush designed to weaken my resolve. But another part recognized this might be the only opportunity for answers. for understanding how my son had transformed from the child I raised into someone capable of such calculated betrayal. "If I agree to this meeting, what would the conditions be?" I asked finally. "It would take place here, in a supervised setting," Ms. Chen explained. "Thomas would remain in restraints, and guards would be present. You could end the conversation at any time. Your attorney would also attend. Basic security precautions, but the image they conjured, my son in handcuffs and prison garb, guards hovering nearby, made my heart ache despite everything he'd done. "I need time to think about this," I said. Ms. Chen nodded, understanding. "Of course, but we would need your decision by tomorrow morning. The court has given us a deadline for plea agreements." I left her office in a state of emotional turmoil, driving aimlessly around town before finally parking near the lakefront. The November wind cut sharply across the water, sending small waves crashing against the shore. I sat in my car, watching, the rhythmic motion, trying to find clarity amidst competing impulses. Seeing Tom meant reopening wounds that had just begun to heal. It meant exposing myself to whatever tactics he might employ: guilt, blame, manipulation, or perhaps most destabilizing, genuine remorse. Could I withstand that emotional weather while maintaining the boundaries I'd fought so hard to establish? Yet refusing the meeting meant potentially closing the door on answers I might later wish I'd sought. Why had he done it? When had he crossed that critical line from financial exploitation to contemplating murder? Was there anything left of the son I thought I knew? I pulled out my phone and called Ellie, explaining the situation and my dilemma. "What does your gut tell you?" she asked after listening carefully. "That I should go," I admitted. "Not for Tom's sake, but for mine, for closure." "Then that's your answer," she said simply. "Just remember, you're not responsible for his choices, and you don't owe him forgiveness." Her reminder steadied me, clarifying my purpose. This meeting wouldn't be about absolution or reconciliation. It would be about facing the truth, however painful, and then continuing on my path forward. I called Ms. Chen and agreed to the meeting, scheduled for 10 o'clock the following morning. Then I texted Rich, asking if he could drive me to the courthouse. His response was immediate. "Of course, I'll be there." That night, I slept fitfully, dreams blending past and present. Tom as a laughing child, running through sprinklers in our backyard. Tom at Eagle Ridge, his hand on my back, eyes calculating the distance to the precipice. I woke before dawn, exhausted but resolute. Rich arrived precisely at 9, his steady presence a balm to my frayed nerves. We drove to the courthouse in comfortable silence, his hand occasionally squeezing mine at stoplights, requiring no words to communicate his support. "I'll be right here when you're done," he assured me as we pulled into the parking lot. "However long it takes." The meeting room was smaller than I'd expected. A windowless space with institutional beige walls and a simple table with 4 chairs. Grace arrived moments after I did, her professional demeanor tinged with protective concern. "You can end this anytime," she reminded me. "One word, and we walk out." I nodded, drawing a deep breath as the door opened again. A uniformed officer entered first, followed by Tom in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed in front of him, another officer behind. His appearance shocked me. Just 2 weeks in custody had left him thinner, paler, dark circles shadowing his eyes. His usual polish had been stripped away, leaving him looking both younger and older somehow, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since his childhood. Our eyes met as he sat across from me, the officers taking positions by the door. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, the weight of everything between us pressing down like a physical presence. "Mom?" he said finally, his voice hoarse. "Thank you for coming." The simple greeting, devoid of the manipulative tactics I'd anticipated, caught me off guard. "You wanted to speak with me," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I'm listening." He nodded, looking down at his cuffed hands. "I've had a lot of time to think in here. About what I did. What I almost did. About who I've become." I remained silent, watching him struggle for words. "There's no excuse," he continued finally. "I know that. For years, I told myself stories. That I was entitled to your money, that you owed me, that I was just being clever by using what was available to me. But in that cell, with nothing but concrete walls and my own thoughts, those stories stopped working." A tear slid down his cheek, but he made no move to wipe it away, his hands still resting on the table. "The truth is, I became something monstrous, something I never thought I could be. And the worst part is, I didn't even realize it was happening. Each step seemed small at the time, borrowing money I didn't intend to repay, manipulating you, emotionally, then forging documents, then—" He faltered, unable to articulate the final escalation. "Then planning my death," I finished for him, my voice steadier than I felt. He flinched as if struck. "Yes. Why, Tom? When did I become worth more to you dead than alive?" The question hung between us, raw and unavoidable. "It wasn't about you," he said quietly. "It was never really about you. It was about money, about escaping the consequences of my mistakes, about maintaining the image I'd created. You were just collateral damage in my mind, an obstacle, a solution." The callousness of the admission should have hurt more than it did. Instead, it confirmed what I'd already begun to understand, that his actions weren't a reflection on my worth or our relationship, but on the moral void within himself. "Rebecca said it would be easy," he continued, the words coming faster now. "She'd researched it, insurance payouts, accident statistics, everything. She made it seem almost normal, just another financial transaction. And I listened because I wanted to believe there was an easy way out of the mess I'd created." "The gambling debts?" I prompted. He nodded miserably. "Much worse than you know. I borrowed from people you don't want to owe money to. The kind who don't send collection notices. They send people to break your legs. The money I took from your account barely covered what I owed, and by then, I was already looking for the, next solution." A twisted logic emerged from his explanation, each desperate act leading to the next, an escalating sequence of moral compromises made in service to survival and maintaining appearances. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," he said, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. "I don't deserve that, and I know it. But I needed you to hear the truth, directly from me. And I needed to tell you that despite everything, I am sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for becoming someone capable of hurting you." The sincerity in his voice seemed genuine, though experience had taught me to be wary of Tom's performances. Still, the setting, the prison jumpsuit, the handcuffs, the guards, stripped away much of his usual artifice. This might be as close to the real Tom as I had seen in years. "What about Rebecca?" I asked. "Where does she stand in all this?" His expression hardened slightly. "She's looking out for herself, as always. Told her lawyer I coerced her, that she was afraid of me. It's not true, but it's smart. She'll probably get a reduced sentence." The revelation didn't surprise me. Their relationship had always seemed based more on mutual advantage than genuine affection. "I've agreed to the plea deal," he continued. 15 years. I'll be 50 when I'm eligible for parole." The number hung in the air between us. 15 years, nearly as long as he'd lived under my roof as a child. A lifetime, in many ways. "What will you do with that time?" I asked, genuinely curious about how he envisioned his future. The question seemed to surprise him. I hadn't thought that far ahead. Survive, I guess. Maybe. Maybe try to understand how I ended up here. How to be different. It was hardly a comprehensive rehabilitation plan, but it was more introspection than I'd heard from him in years. Whether it represented genuine change or merely the shock of consequences finally catching up to him remained to be seen. "I'm scheduled to be transferred to state prison next week," he said. "I probably won't see you again for a long time, if ever. I needed you to know that beneath everything else, I do realize what I've done. To you. To us." I nodded, a complex mixture of emotions swirling within me. Grief for what might have been, relief that this chapter was closing, cautious hope that perhaps, in the crucible of consequence, Tom might eventually forge a better self. "I wish things had been different," I said finally. "For both of us." He nodded, eyes downcast again. "Me too, Mom. Me too." The officer by the door stepped forward, indicating our time was drawing to a close. I stood, gathering my purse, suddenly exhausted by the emotional weight of the exchange. "Take care of yourself, Tom," I said, the maternal instinct to offer comfort arising despite everything. He looked up, a flash of the child he'd been visible beneath the hardened exterior. "You too, Mom. Be happy. You deserve that." With that, the officers escorted him from the room, the door closing behind them with a definitive click. I sat back, down, legs suddenly unsteady, overwhelmed by the finality of it all. Grace waited silently, allowing me space to process. "Are you all right?" she asked eventually. "Yes," I said, somewhat surprised to find it was true. It was painful, but necessary. I needed to see him, to understand as much as possible. "And do you understand?" I considered the question carefully. "Not completely. I don't think I ever will. But enough to move forward without being haunted by unanswered questions." She nodded approvingly. "That's probably the best outcome you could hope for in these circumstances." We walked together to the courthouse entrance, where Rich waited exactly as promised, his face lighting with relief when he saw me. "How did it go?" he asked gently as we walked to his truck. "About as well as something like that could go," I replied. "Tom has agreed to the plea deal. It's over, legally speaking." "And emotionally?" I smiled faintly at his perceptiveness. "That's more complicated. But I think I've found as much closure as I'm going to get." He nodded understanding, opening the passenger door for me. "Where to now?" The question seemed to encompass more than just our immediate destination. "Home first," I decided. Then, maybe a walk by the lake. I need to clear my head before tomorrow. "Tomorrow?" he asked. "My first watercolor class at the community center," I reminded him. 8 eager seniors waiting to learn how to paint landscapes. His face brightened. "That's right. New beginnings." The phrase resonated as we drove through town. New beginnings, emerging from painful endings, fresh growth from scorched earth. Life's perpetual cycle of renewal, even after the most devastating losses. At home, Charlie greeted me with his usual enthusiasm, oblivious to the emotional journey I'd just completed. His simple joy at my return, his uncomplicated affection, felt like a balm to my wounded spirit. Rich insisted on making lunch while I changed into more comfortable clothes. By the time I returned to the kitchen, he had prepared a simple meal of soup and sandwiches, familiar comfort food that required no thought or effort to enjoy. "You're good at this," I observed as we ate. "Taking care of people." He smiled, a touch of sadness in his eyes. "Practice, unfortunately." Alice's illness was long and difficult. You learn to anticipate needs, to provide comfort without making it feel like charity. The glimpse into his past care for his late wife touched me deeply. "She was fortunate to have you." "I was fortunate to have her," he corrected gently. Even knowing how it would end, I wouldn't trade our time together for anything. His perspective shifted something in my own thinking, a reminder that love, even when imperfect or eventually lost, still held value. The years I'd spent raising Tom, despite where we'd ended up, had contained genuine moments of connection and joy. Those memories remained true, even if the relationship had ultimately failed. After lunch, we walked along the lake shore, bundled against the November chill. The water stretched gray and vast before us, small waves lapping at the rocky beach. Few others braved the cold, giving us the shoreline almost entirely to ourselves. "I've been thinking," Rich said as we followed the curving path. "The community garden is hosting a winter planting workshop next month. Indoor herbs, early seedlings for spring. Might be a nice addition to your teaching schedule, if you're interested." The invitation represented more than just a gardening class. It was an invitation to further integration into the community, to building a life rich with connections and purpose. "I'd like that," I said, linking my arm through his. "Very much." We walked in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythmic sound of waves providing a soothing backdrop to my thoughts. The future that stretched before me looked nothing like what I'd imagined even 6 months ago. No family holidays with Tom and Rebecca, no grandchildren to spoil, none of the traditional milestones I'd once anticipated. Yet the alternative vision taking shape held its own promise. Teaching art to eager learners, cultivating gardens with Rich, developing friendships within the community, pursuing my painting with renewed dedication. A life defined not by blood ties but by chosen connections, not by obligation but by genuine affinity. "Penny for your thoughts," Rich said, interrupting my reverie. "I was just thinking about expectations versus reality," I replied. "How sometimes the life you end up with looks nothing like the one you planned, but might be beautiful in entirely different ways." He nodded thoughtfully. "Alice used to say something similar, that life is what happens while you're busy making other plans." "Wise woman," I observed. "She was," he agreed. "She also said that happiness isn't a destination, but a traveling companion. Not something you achieve once and for all, but something you cultivate daily through small choices." The concept resonated deeply. Happiness as practice rather than achievement, as companion rather than destination. It seemed a more sustainable approach than the all-or-nothing thinking that had characterized much of my earlier life. As we turned to head back toward town, the sun emerged briefly from behind cloud cover, casting golden light across the water's surface. The sudden illumination transformed the landscape. What had seemed gray and featureless now revealed subtle variations of color and texture, depth and dimension previously hidden. I paused, struck by the metaphor the changing light provided. My own life, seemingly shadowed by Tom's betrayal, was similarly capable of revelation under the right illumination. The darkness hadn't disappeared, but it no longer defined everything. Light could still break through, revealing beauty and possibility I might otherwise miss. "We should get back," Rich said, checking his watch. "Ellie mentioned she might stop by this afternoon." I nodded, taking one last look at the illuminated lake before turning toward home. As we walked, plans for tomorrow's art class took shape in my mind. Demonstrations I would prepare, techniques I would introduce, the joy of sharing something I loved with others eager to learn. "Will you come to my class tomorrow?" I asked impulsively. I could use the moral support. Rich smiled warmly. "I wouldn't miss it. Though I should warn you, I have absolutely no artistic talent. My stick figures look like they've suffered serious accidents." I laughed, the sound carrying across the empty beach. "Perfect. You can be my before example." His mock outrage only made me laugh harder. The moment of levity a welcome respite from the emotional intensity of the morning's prison visit. By the time we reached my house, I felt lighter. Not unburdened exactly, but more balanced. The weight of Tom's betrayal remained, a sorrow I would likely carry always. But it no longer threatened to topple me. Other forces now provided counterbalance: friendship, creative purpose, community connection, and this tentative, gentle romance blooming between Rich and me. Ellie's car was parked in my driveway, and she waved from the porch as we approached. "There you are. I was beginning to think you'd eloped." "And miss the chance to hear your opinion on that decision? Never," I retorted, climbing the steps to embrace her. "How did it go this morning?" she asked more seriously as we entered. "The house." I recounted the meeting with Tom, his confession, the finalized plea agreement. Ellie listened attentively, her expression shifting between concern and relief. "So it's really over," she said when I finished. "Legally, at least." "Yes," I confirmed. "Tom will serve his sentence and I'll live my life." "A life that appears to have some interesting new developments," she observed with a meaningful glance toward Rich, who had tactfully busied himself making tea in the kitchen. I smiled, unable to deny the obvious. "We're taking things slowly, one day at a time." "As you should," she agreed. "But Maggie, seeing you like this, engaged with life again, making plans, opening yourself to new possibilities, it's wonderful. You deserve this happiness, especially after everything you've been through." Her validation touched me deeply. Ellie had witnessed my journey from the beginning, the gradual erosion of boundaries with Tom, the escalating exploitation, the crisis point, and now this emergence into new possibility. Her perspective carried the weight of that shared history. "Thank you," I said simply, "for everything. I couldn't have navigated this without you." "Of course you could have," she countered firmly. "You're stronger than you know, but I'm glad you didn't have to do it alone." Rich returned with tea for all of us, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. My upcoming art class, the community garden's winter plans, Ellie's grandchildren's holiday visit. Normal, everyday matters that formed the texture of a life being rebuilt. As evening approached, both Ellie and Rich prepared to leave, each with promises to check in tomorrow. Standing at my door, watching their cars disappear down the street, I felt an unexpected surge of contentment. Not happiness exactly. That seemed too simple a word for the complex emotional landscape I inhabited. But a sense of rightness, of alignment with my own values and needs after years of compromise. Inside, I prepared a simple dinner for myself, then settled in my favorite chair with Charlie at my feet and a new mystery novel in hand. The quiet domesticity of the moment struck me as both ordinary and precious, a small perfect interval of peace in a life that had known significant turmoil. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the first art class to teach, ongoing legal matters to finalize, emotional processing still to complete. But tonight, in this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. Not defined by Tom's betrayal, not desperately seeking external validation, but simply present in my own life, attentive to its unfolding possibilities. As Charlie dozed beside me, I set aside my book and reached for the sketch pad I kept near my chair. With swift, sure strokes, I began drawing. Not a detailed composition, but a loose, expressive rendering of the lake as we'd seen it today, light breaking through clouds, illuminating what had seemed featureless gray. The sketch took shape quickly, capturing not photographic detail, but emotional essence. The moment of revelation when perspective shifts and what was always present suddenly becomes visible in new ways. I added the date in the corner and a simple title, New Beginning. Then I closed the sketchbook, turned out the lights, and prepared for bed, ready to meet whatever tomorrow might bring with clear eyes and an open heart. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.